That's like somebody did that for a Thursday night game, dude. Someone got a waiver claim in, but didn't actually want the guy. They just didn't want like their opponent who they felt like would pick him up to use him. So they picked him up and then dropped him right away. So he was on
Yeah,
waivers.
I was about to say, like, how do you feel about people doing that? Because, like,
I've never thought to do that. Guess it's strategy.
I've done that a couple times, but it hasn't been like a championship matchup or anything. I'm usually up whenever waivers go through on like Wednesday mornings. So I usually like get my waiver claims in or like the aftermath of it before everybody else does.
All right. All right. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Around the 412 Fantasy Football Show, proudly presented by Crowworthy. Winners are serving winners coast to coast with sports, gambling, and more. Follow at Crowworthy on Twitter. Visit us at crowworthy.com. Also, check out the Pittsburgh City page at crowworthy.com for podcasts such as this one, blogs, and more. I am Smitty. With me, as always, is my co-host for the show, Mr. Donnie Druin.
Smitty, it's another beautiful week to discuss fantasy football. One more week deep into the trenches as a Christian McCaffrey owner. One more week without him playing, which sucks. But
you knew where I was going right away.
I hope there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but right now it's just tunnel. So,
Yeah, 3-0 for me this week. Close game with our good friend Sarge. My other two were absolute blowouts where I wasn't even worried about the game after the Sunday 1 o'clock slate. So I got some really stacked teams in some of my leagues. Mine that I'm talking about where I went up with Sarge is probably my weakest team, but I squeaked out another win, hold on firmly to a playoff spot in all 3 leagues. So I'm feeling pretty good. But yeah, we're going to, once again, if you are a listener or watcher of the show, you know that every week we try to bring you guys something different now. So what we did this week is some head-to-head matchups. So I got some QB versus QB questions that I'm going to ask Donnie which one would he start, and also he's going to have some for me. Same with running backs, same with receivers, same with tight ends. So we're excited to dive into it. We're also going to give you guys, of course, as always, the waiver wire stuff and talk about what's going to happen in New Orleans now with this Drew Brees injury news. Don't know exactly how much time he's going to miss. We don't know how the snaps are going to shake out, but we're going to talk more about it. So without further ado, I'm going to tell you guys about our favorite sponsor. That's a shot at Keeks, by the way. No, it's not. But I'll tell you about one of our favorite sponsors, which is Manscaped. So it's football season, folks. That means it's time to throw on your team's colors and make sure you don't fumble your grooming below the waist. Our partners at Manscaped are here to save your boys from a TJ Watt hit, so you stay clean and take care of yourself where it matters most. Manscaped is here with a surefire touchdown with the best tools for your grooming experience. That's why Manscaped has redesigned the electric trimmer. The Manscaped engineering team spent 18 months to perfect the greatest ball hair trimmer ever created and just released the new and improved Lawnmower 3.0 trimmer. The Lawnmower 3.0 trimmer is simply the best hygiene tool for the modern man. Because of the ceramic blade and skin-safe technology, your snags will be reduced. Their Perfect Package 3.0 comes with a new and improved lawnmower, which is waterproof. It's a cordless body hair trimmer. You get the performance boxer briefs along with that and a travel bag for when we are done quarantining. The Perfect Package 3.0 also comes with a crop preserver and crop reviver, which I always refer to as the ball deodorant and the ball toner, which are absolute must-haves. You can get all these products along with more at manscaped.com, and if you use the code 412 at checkout, that should get you 20% off your order plus free shipping. So again, code 412 at checkout would give you 20% off plus free shipping. Manscaped.com. Head there as soon as you are done watching / listening to this episode of the Around the 412 Fantasy Football Show.
I say it every week and I'll say it again. I literally could not have said it better.
Ricky, I'm sorry. I saw you just came in with something while I was reading that. I'm gonna have to go back and check what it was because now it's disappeared from my my TV here. So let me look at my phone and I'll be able to pull it up because I know Ricky's coming with the heat. My opponent this week needs a tight end. I have higher waiver priority, so I put in a request for the best tight end available. Hey, there you go.
Do it, man. Yeah.
So Ricky must have been hearing he must have heard the conversation right before I pressed record. And you can get in on this exclusive YouTube interaction by heading to youtube.com/C/around the 412 to make sure you are watching the episodes as opposed to just going back and listening to the podcast. But we appreciate you, whatever you're doing. Anyways, Ricky's normally here early. He heard our conversation. That is definitely a smart strategy. It's something I've never used. Donnie said he has used it in the past. I've never even really seen it happen in my leagues. It did happen once this year. Teddy Bridgewater was playing the Thursday night game against Atlanta, which at the time, Atlanta was giving up the most points to opposing quarterbacks. So he was like the hot waiver wire commodity. Teddy Bridgewater was. And somebody decided to put a claim in for him, even though they didn't need a quarterback, because they knew their opponent was probably going to be streaming one for that week. They get Bridgewater off of waivers and then drop him on Thursday morning. So he's no longer there. And he's on waivers until the following week, because obviously he wasn't playing Sunday. So it is definitely a strategy that I've now seen. I don't know if I'll utilize, but apparently it's a thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you have the bench space to do so, I mean, I don't see why not. Like, it's a little bit of a gamesmanship as much as you can get away with in fantasy football. So no, I mean, is it the asshole thing to do? Absolutely, yeah. But
some rivalries.
But you're here to win fantasy football championships, and that's why people are listening to the show as well. So, at least from our end, I would say definitely do it if you can.
Yeah, if you want to make friends, you're in the wrong place. No, but okay. So let's talk about this. Like I said, this is something we haven't done on here yet. So we're excited to bring something new to the people. And I guess I'll just start because my first quarterback matchup, we're throwing our boy out there, Big Ben Roethlisberger, going against Jacksonville, projected 23.6 points per Yahoo. Would you rather start him or Lamar Jackson going against the Tennessee Titans, who's projected 24.4 points in that matchup?
Yeah, it's funny because I looked at both of those quarterbacks for my matchup that I'm going to be asking you about here in a little bit. I definitely think Sunday night did Lamar Jackson no favors at all. Whether we're talking about just the weather or, the game planning that the Patriots had, put around him. But, at the end of the day, he's still one of the best fantasy football quarterbacks in the league, although, we have seen a drop in his production this year. I think we got to ride the hot hand. I think we go Ben Roethlisberger against the Jaguars defense, the 1-8 Jaguars or 1-9. I forget which one. Somebody lost in there. The Jaguars, they just haven't been able to win football games. Steelers are undefeated for a reason. Big Ben is the biggest proponent of that, no pun intended. He's firing on all cylinders right now, fresh off a week where he threw, I think, 4 touchdown passes over 300 yards. It's just a phenomenal outing. And yeah, even though Lamar is the better fantasy football quarterback, I just really like Big Ben's matchup against Jacksonville this week.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. And that would sound weird probably at the beginning of the season, because even as Steeler fans, we got to put our bias aside. Lamar Jackson came into this year as QB1, QB2 for fantasy football perspective, a guy that we thought was completely matchup proof. And I still think he presents to you a pretty solid floor. I mean, what he adds with his legs, at least, is going to get you enough points where, he's still a fringe QB1 week in, week out. But at the same time, you mentioned it, what Big Ben has been doing from a fantasy perspective, going against the Jaguars here. Now, the one thing I would be weary of, even though we have seen the Steelers not have much of a run game these past few weeks, is if the Steelers get up by a couple possessions in this game, then go away from the passing game. And if Ben doesn't get his numbers early, could he get those numbers at all? Because you might see them, go ground and pound. We saw, for the non-Steeler fans that might be listening to this show, Tomlin Tuesday today, he literally addressed the run game and said they're going to make it a point of emphasis in practice this week and in the game this week to start running the rock better than they have, because it hasn't been up to snuff. So James Conner and company, I think, will and should have a big day on Sunday. And I think that to a degree will, cap what Ben is going to do. Hopefully he gets his numbers early. I'm going to say that he does. I still think Ben has a pretty solid day. I think he does more than Lamar Jackson does against Tennessee. Yeah,
and let's not forget the Tennessee Titans are the team last year in the playoffs that kind of laid out the blueprint for stopping a modernized Lamar Jackson who's kind of fine-tuned his skills, at least as a rusher. They definitely gave other teams the key to the car just in terms of game planning and stopping for him. And we've seen that, quite a few times this year. And let's not forget, I know we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but I mean, Lamar Jackson has to play Sunday against Tennessee, and then 4 days later on Thanksgiving has to go to Pittsburgh. So, not the best stretch of games coming up for Lamar.
Yeah, and I was going to say, too, I don't know that this should play into the decision one way or the other, because we're talking about both quarterbacks now. The fact that they do match up against each other just 4 days later, but both of these matchups, and I know that Pittsburgh being undefeated, they can't look past Jacksonville to the Ravens game. The Ravens need to win this game with where they are, where the Titans are in the playoff spot right now, fighting for those wild card spots. Neither team can afford to look past their opponent this upcoming week to that matchup on Thanksgiving, but I feel like in the back of their mind, it's going to be hard to do so.
Yep. And
I think more so for the Steelers, because they're in a position where they're playing an inferior opponent. They're going on the road to play Jacksonville, a team that, is the only thing they're competing for is the number one pick. They're hoping the Jets win a couple games. So yeah, whereas the Ravens, again, fighting for their lives. So you just wonder in the back of your mind if that's something that could pop up. Again, this really doesn't play into the fantasy part of it, but go ahead. Ask me, who's your quarterbacks you got matched up here?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you the choice of either Matthew Stafford at Carolina or Cam Newton at Houston. So facing the 16th ranked defense. Stafford is projected 18.2 points on ESPN. He currently ranks as ESPN's quarterback number 17, whereas Newton is facing the 19th ranked defense, projected 19.2 points and ranked as quarterback 19. These guys are virtually similar to each other in almost every fantasy aspect. So.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Cam. And the reason we go with Cam is for the health of not just Matthew Stafford, but his number one weapon, Kenny Golladay. That, along with when you look at Cam, I think kind of going back to Lamar, he presents a decent floor just because of the what he does on the ground. He hasn't thrown a lot of touchdowns this year, but you can bank on him running in for one, it seems like, every single week. So, they get within that 5-yard line, he's going to score a rushing touchdown. We've seen it week in and week out. So I will take Cam for that reason over Matthew Stafford, because I know that you just read Tom Pelissero's thing that, he expects Matthew Stafford to play and whatnot, but there's still, to me, that kind of changes things. And also, again, Kenny Golladay banged up, didn't play this past week. So I don't love the situation there right now in Detroit. Not that I love the situation in New England, but, you looked at the last couple weeks, I feel like Jacoby Myers, a guy that I might bring up later in the show, starting to emerge there. So, I like New England's spot a little bit better than where Detroit's at right now. So I'll take Cam Newton.
Yeah, I'd definitely have to agree. I think if we were talking about a healthy Matthew Stafford and healthy Kenny Golladay, it might change things up a little bit. But just in terms of matchup, when Cam Newton's been able to do as of late, you really got to like it over the proponents of Stafford going to Carolina. Granted, like I said a little bit earlier, there's not too much leeway either or. I feel like, I'm not choosing Cam Newton in a substantially greater manner than I'm choosing Matthew Stafford. But just when comparing the two, I feel like I'd rather roll the dice on Cam Newton this week than Stafford.
Yeah, I wouldn't pound the table to be starting either of these guys. Yeah. So, my running back matchups, one of them I'm really intrigued by just because both running backs are in the same backfield. So I'm looking at Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt here. Which one would you rather use? They're going against Philadelphia this week. Nick Chubb projected 14.7 points. Kareem Hunt projected 12.28. Nick Chubb obviously just came back this past Sunday. Kind of like I wouldn't say necessarily took like a backseat to Kareem Hunt, but when we saw they were grinding out that game up until the Nick Chubb run right at the end, which he decided to go out of bounds. By the way, that cost Sarge the game against me.
I was about to say, not only did that cost a lot of people fantasy points, but the Browns would have covered in that game. Scored. So he got a lot of people different kinds of money throughout the lane.
Yeah. So either way, I mean, I don't know if we are this is what things are going to look like, or if they were just easing Nick Chubb back in. But if you were playing just one of these guys, which one are you picking from the Cleveland backfield right now?
Man, I just think I still have to roll with Chubb, and we talk about him having a quieter day, but he still had over 100 yards. Granted, a big chunk of that did come on the very last play where he broke and nearly scored a touchdown. But yeah, I mean, we've talked about this multiple times. Sure, Hunt and Chubb are still going to have their respective roles in the backfield, but I mean, I think blindfolded going to any game, regardless of the matchup, the Cleveland Browns are still going to start, their offensive attack with Nick Chubb and kind of see how he plays. So, I know he doesn't get a lot of passing work thanks to Kareem Hunt's role there, but Chubb's still kind of the motor for that offense, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I would be the exact same way. I think the world of Nick Chubb. I think he's one of the best pure running backs that we have in this league. Obviously, he doesn't, he's not as versatile as what like Alvin Kamara or a healthy Christian McCaffrey bring to the table. But you look at like a guy like Dalvin Cook, who's now being talked about as like one of the best running backs in the league. Derrick Henry, like the best pure running backs. I think Nick Chubb is in that conversation. So Nick Chubb would definitely be the guy. I think that as you alluded to, it's not like he had a bad day. He did get a huge chunk of his yardage on that last play, but I think it was more of, his first game back in a while. I think this week we see him get more touches than he did last week, and he would be the guy that I would be starting as well. So, yeah, why don't you give me your first one of the running backs?
Yeah, so my first matchup for you is going to be Jonathan Taylor versus the Green Bay Packers, or Mike Davis versus the Lions. So Taylor and Davis are facing the top two worst defenses in terms of points allowed to running backs per game. Taylor facing the second worst, Mike Davis facing the first worst. Surprisingly enough, Jonathan Taylor is projected only 9.9 points, whereas Mike Davis is projected 18.2 points. Davis is currently running back 10 in ESPN leagues, and Jonathan Taylor is currently running back 19.
I'm going with Davis here. It just seems like Indy's hell bent on using all three of the guys. We've seen Nyheim Hines score a couple touchdowns last week. The week before that, Jordan Wilkins led their backfield. Jonathan Taylor, and it's not because he only has the one fumble, that the Ravens returned for a touchdown. So that hasn't necessarily been an issue. I don't know if it's a vision problem or what. He hasn't been incredibly effective this year. And it's weird because Indy's considered, one of the better offensive lines in football. But no matter who's been the running back, I think Nyheim Hines has overall been the most effective week in and week out. But their running game hasn't had really much consistency, and it's just odd when you look at that offensive line that that's been the case. But I'll go with Mike Davis here just because of that. I think the workload is just going to be a huge discrepancy between when you look at those two, the touches that Mike Davis is going to get as opposed to Jonathan Taylor, because with no Christian McCaffrey, we've seen the workload that Mike Davis has in Carolina. There's not really somebody else to chip into that like there is in Indianapolis, Nyheim Hines and Jordan Wilkins. So Mike Davis is the guy for me here, and it's pretty clear cut.
Yeah, it's crazy because a lot of people were pounding the table for a Jonathan Taylor, breakout rookie season.
Especially when Marlon Mack went down. Like
you can make an argument that he's not even the lead back right now. And like you said, Nyheim Hines has kind of been the most effective running back in that, trio. And there's certain plays where you look at Jonathan Taylor run and you're like, wow, like this kid's special. And then he just gets outworked by all the other guys in the backfield. So I'm not too sure what's going on. I'm right there with you. I do like Mike Davis simply due to the touches he's bound to see and, just the lack of other opportunity around him. So Davis is definitely the guy in Carolina. Jonathan Taylor, especially after last week's poor performance, a lot of question marks around him.
Yeah, and here's the thing, not necessarily relating it to fantasy football. Jonathan Taylor was a guy that I was pretty adamant about. I didn't want the Steelers to draft. I just didn't want them to go running back at 49. He didn't get there anyway. But the thing with me was if he didn't produce right away, there was so much tread on his tires. Or I'm sorry, there wasn't much tread on his tires because of how used he was in college. Over 1,000 touches at the University of Wisconsin. So they ran his brakes off essentially, and they even admitted to that. So I'm not sure that this is a guy that's going to be around or playing at a high level during his second contract, or even the last few years of his first contract. So if he's not effective right away, I thought it was going to be a bad draft pick. So far, he hasn't been that great in Indianapolis. Again, we've seen some runs where like, wow, like that's what you expected. That's the type of pedigree this guy brings to the table. But then you see what Nyheim Hines, Jordan Wilkins do. I don't know. I'm not sold on Jonathan Taylor. And like I said, he had to be very good right away to make this a good pick because of how many touches he had in college, and there's not much tread left on those tires. Okay, speaking of rookie running backs, I got two for you that I'm going to match up, and I want to see where you go with this. Also, I realized we didn't talk much about this beforehand. I hope we don't have any of the same guys, but it's going to be interesting to see if we do.
Even if we do, I don't think we'll have the same matchup just because we're comparing two at the same time. So
that's true. So it's going to be two other rookie running backs. DeAndre Swift. We've been talking about this Carolina-Detroit matchup quite a bit. The rookie running back for Detroit, or Antonio Gibson. So DeAndre Swift goes against Carolina. He's projected 13.42 points. Antonio Gibson going against Cincinnati is projected 12.77.
My initial reaction tells me Swift, just because, Swift finally got unleashed, last week for the Lions, and he had a phenomenal outing. Whereas Antonio Gibson kind of saw the rise of Jake McKissick in the last couple of weeks. McKissick's been a PPR monster, and he's probably going to be one of the hottest waiver wire pickups if he's not already owned in your league. But I feel like the Lions handed Swift the keys to the car last week, and he did phenomenal things with them. Had a great fantasy day and a great regular football day as well. They're both super talented running backs, and had McKissick not been there, and I understand that there's still a couple of other guys in the towards backfield as well. I just like Swift moving forward, just based off momentum and where the two guys are at in their respective seasons so far.
Yeah, I'm with you on Swift. Last week was the first week that he was listed as the starter. We knew he was going to have an expanded workload, but not necessarily to the degree that he did. He was kind of in a situation where he was making the most of his touches, but like Adrian Peterson was still the goal line guy and short yardage guy, so he was vulturing everything away from him. And he said there are a couple other guys in the mix there as well. But now the wording that you use, being handed the keys to the car, that's what it looks like. He's the clear lead guy. Whereas in Washington, Antonio Gibson getting a lot of the touches on the ground. When they go to the pass, it's been J.D. McKissick. And if you're in a PPR league, I think DeAndre Swift is the clear-cut option here. When I looked at the projected points, though, less than a point separating them. That's why I matched them up together. They're both rookies. So I was curious to see where you went with it, but I completely agree that DeAndre Swift would be the guy I went with. Before you give me your next one, we did get a couple questions in here. Anthony wants to know, do I start Mike Davis or Josh Jacobs?
Who do the Raiders play?
That's a good question. I should know that because I have Josh Jacobs. They play Kansas City Sunday Night Football.
I don't know. Mike Davis facing the defense who gives up the most points to running backs in fantasy football. I really like that matchup, even with a guy like Josh Jacobs, who's kind of been up and down this year. He hasn't really lived up to his top 10 ADP just in terms of being drafted. Yeah, I feel like I'd definitely go Mike Davis there. Sorry,
so Jalen Richard left the game with a chest injury, but Devontae Booker has been the guy that's kind of been involved in that game. I'm sorry, not in the game, in that run game as well. So it's tough. Again, Carolina without Christian McCaffrey, it's just Mike Davis.
Yeah, just Mike.
This is a lot closer than it should be. Josh Jacobs versus Mike Davis. See, the thing for me, this probably isn't going to make any sense. When it's a flip of a coin, as it almost is here for me, I go with the guy that has the game in the latest slate. Josh Jacobs playing on Sunday night, just because I have to so that way, if he's down by 5 points or something like that, but I still have Josh Jacobs playing on Sunday night, you pretty much know you're going to win. If you're down by 10, 15 points, you're like, oh, I still have a chance to win, but I have Josh Jacobs. I don't know. It's just a mental thing for me where it's I
definitely get it because I hate having my guys play on Thursday Night Football.
Yeah.
So I definitely get that.
Or even if all my guys play at 1:00, I'm like, oh man, I'm just gonna be watching his team now. My points aren't going anywhere; they're set in stone. So that's why I like to have guys play on Sunday night, Monday night. So for me, where this is a very close call by a slight margin, I'm going with Josh Jacobs over Mike Davis.
I still got to go Davis just over opportunity,
And I completely get it. We also had a question from Ricky here. I have to decide between Tannehill versus Baltimore or Wentz versus Cleveland. Oh, man.
Tannehill's been pretty efficient this year.
What's that?
So Tannehill's been pretty efficient this year. So that doesn't scare me. And defense, especially defense, doesn't scare me like it used to.
I think though, let me see if this is correct. I don't want to say something on here that's wrong. Okay, he did. So last 2 weeks, he hasn't topped 20. The 2 weeks prior to that got just over 20. So last 4 weeks, 20.3, 20.82, 17.12, 12.28. Baltimore allows the 9th fewest points to quarterbacks.
Yeah, but are you really going to roll the dice?
And then, that's the thing. So it's not necessarily about me liking Carson Wentz more or it's just about me liking him less, I guess. I don't love Ryan Tannehill's matchup here, but I don't like the potential of Carson Wentz against really anybody.
Yeah, and Cleveland's defense isn't a pushover either, especially against lesser opponents.
No, so yeah, they have they're 12th, so they're kind of middle of the pack. They allow the 12th most points to quarterbacks. It is, as of right now, looking like rain as well for that game in Cleveland.
I'd definitely go Tannehill then.
Yeah. And again, I don't, Ricky, I mean, I don't love either matchup here, man, but I think that this is just more about me not liking Wentz that much than it is about how much I like Tannehill, because I do not like Tannehill's matchup either. I just don't like Wentz against really anybody.
So I don't like either of their ceilings this week, but I'm a much bigger fan of Tannehill's floor than Wentz's floor. Because Wentz's floor is
You also said Stafford and Cousins are in free agency.
I'm going to talk about Kirk Cousins in a little bit. So,
yeah, well, it's going to be a guy that I considered actually as well. So, yeah, we'll save that for then, but we'll keep that in mind, Ricky, because we'll talk about him in a second. Anthony did have one more thing. And do I start Austin Hooper, Smith, or Thomas?
I'm assuming he means Jonnu Smith and then Thomas. I'm not sure.
That could only be Ian Thomas, I would think.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't be on my radar.
Jonnu's probably the more established tight end out of those three.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. Austin Hooper's a guy that last week I talked about, long term. Maybe being a guy that I would consider picking up for the position, but it's just because it's so thin. I think even with Jonnu Smith, we've seen the touches, go down, but he's making the most opportunity when he does get the ball. We saw them, not that you can count on it, but we've seen him run in a touchdown now. I mean, they creative with him. So he's only touching the ball, 3 or 4 times a game, but it's in the red zone. So I'll take that opportunity and throw a dart on that as opposed to a guy like Austin Hooper, or, I'm assuming this is Ian Thomas. Or could it be Logan Thomas in Washington? It's probably Logan Thomas.
That could be.
That would make more sense. That would make way more sense than the Ian Thomas.
I am also going to talk about Logan Thomas a little bit later.
Yeah, I have him on my list as well.
I mean, yeah, either
I'm still with Jonnu Smith, but
yeah, just because he's more established. I mean, I do like Logan Thomas's matchup this week. And obviously I have him, why we're talking about him in a little bit, but
okay. Where were we? You have a running back matchup for me.
Yeah. So we just finished talking on Taylor and Davis. This is my final one for you. Kalen Ballage versus the New York Jets, or a guy we just talked about actually for you, Damian Harris at Houston. You said you put a waiver claim in for him. So
yeah, I'm pounding the table for Damian Harris.
Yeah. So I'll run you the numbers really quick. Both of them have favorable matchups. Ballage is facing the 26th ranked defense, whereas Damian Harris is facing the 30th ranked defense. Ballage is projected 14.1 points, whereas Harris is projected 11 points. And they're both ranked outside of the top 50 just in terms of fantasy football running backs. We've seen Ballage kind of take over the role for the Chargers as their lead back. But yeah, Damian Harris is coming off a fantastic performance on Sunday night.
Yeah, I feel like they're kind of underrating him, at least with that fantasy projection. I get that, Rex Burkhead's involved, James White's involved. And for the Chargers, we haven't seen a ton of Josh Kelly, Troy Maine Pope, but both running backs are in systems where there's 3 guys who are at least getting some touches right now out of that backfield. So Damian Harris, who we've seen run for 100 yards 2 times in the last month, I'll take him over. I understand there's a little bit of hype growing with this Ballage, but got thrown away in Miami, couldn't make the Jets roster. So I don't know. I mean, I'm a big fan of Damian Harris. It's probably more about how I feel about Damian Harris, what I've seen him do recently, than it is trying to downplay what Ballage has done. But yeah, I mean, for me, this is a no-brainer, even though Ballage is projected 3 more points.
Yeah, and you kind of have to wonder how much more magic does Ballage having the tank before your defenses really start keying on him and kind of limiting him in that aspect. I think I'm not as high on Harris just because I feel like the rain was a big part on the Patriots running the football so much, and like you mentioned, there's Rex Burkhead still there. James White's still there in New England as well. So there's a plethora of other guys in the Patriots backfield that can take over. a game like that, and I'm not so sure that they're sold on Damien Harris as the guy moving forward. So it's a tough matchup for me. I feel like Harris obviously is a more established guy, so I'd probably side with him.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'm a big believer in it. I mean, if he has another 100-yard performance this week, I feel like that's going to be his job. So we'll see. But as you mentioned, game script was pretty favorable for him. Moving along, I'm going to go with a rookie wide receiver matchup here, one that a lot of people are talking about which one's better. We're going to go with our guy, Chase Claypool, going against the Jacksonville Jaguars, projected 12.79 points, or Justin Jefferson in Minnesota. They go against the Dallas Cowboys. He's projected 12.78. So literally 0.01 difference there.
Yeah, I feel like I have to go Jefferson. And that's not a slight at Chase Claypool at all, because he definitely gets the targets and he definitely, puts up the production whenever the ball is in his hands. I just feel like there's a lot of potential mounts to feed in Pittsburgh, whether it's the Steelers running the ball, whether it's Deontay Johnson or Juju or, Eric Ebron, potentially eating that day. And, like we mentioned earlier, game scripts could get out of hand if things go as expected in Jacksonville. And the Steelers could be looking to run the ball a whole lot towards the tail end of the game. Whereas you look at a team like Minnesota, who I feel like they're not really, set to dominate week in and week out. Passing is always going to be an option for them. And Justin Jefferson has, benefited a ton from the double coverage that Adam Thielen has seen, has benefited a ton from, the attention that Dalvin Cook has garnered near the line of scrimmage as well. Both rookie receivers are phenomenal, but Justin Jefferson this week, against a very poor Dallas secondary, I really like that matchup.
And I 100% agree, and here's why. You mentioned one of the 2 points that I was going to make when it came back to me, and I'm glad that you did. We talked about it before. You never know who is going to be the guy for that week for Pittsburgh. Granted, it's been Chase Claypool a good bit, but Deontay Johnson, when he's healthy, still has more targets game in and game out. Juju Smith-Schuster is still going to have his production, especially in third down. He's the guy that Ben looks to. And I feel like my second point, and then what I was going to get to, was in PPR leagues, Justin Jefferson can still have, 15 to 20 point games or even more than that without scoring a touchdown. Chase Claypool is just not going to do that. He's got to score a touchdown if he's going to have a monster game. Justin Jefferson, we literally just saw it last night, has close to 20 points without scoring a touchdown. So that is just the way that Justin Jefferson is built. He's a PPR machine, doesn't need to get in the end zone, whereas Chase Claypool, we've seen it. In order to put up huge fantasy numbers, it's going to require him getting in the end zone at least once.
I completely agree. I wouldn't complain if I had to decide to choose between either or. They've both been phenomenal this year. Staying in that Vikings matchup, though, I also have another rookie receiver I want to pose a question to you. CeeDee Lamb versus the Minnesota Vikings, or Devontae Parker versus the Denver Broncos. Lamb is facing the 29th ranked defense, whereas Parker is facing the 18th ranked defense, just in terms of line points to receivers. Lamb is projected 11.1 points, whereas Devontae Parker is projected 13.7. Lamb is currently the wide receiver 25 in ESPN leagues, whereas Parker is wide receiver 37.
I know that the Cowboys are expecting Andy Dalton back, and that should help out the receivers a little bit, elevate them a little bit. I got to go with Devontae Parker here. I'm not sold on that Cowboys passing game without Dak Prescott. Granted, it's not like, Tua has shown up and thrown for 400 yards a game. And as you mentioned, where Parker is right now, it's not like he's having huge games either, but I feel like he's the safer option here. And I like his, I don't hate either matchup, honestly. But I just feel, and I've talked about it before, every week we're going to see a little bit more from Tua, and they're going to start to open up the playbook a little bit more each week. And Devontae Parker still, to me, the clear number one in that passing game. So, I'll take him as, opposed to CeeDee Lamb, who at best is behind Amari Cooper. And on some weeks, and we saw the connection Andy Dalton had with Michael Gallup right away, maybe Andy Dalton coming back, maybe that becomes, his go-to guy, or at least the number 2 to Cooper. So I don't know what to think of Lamb with Andy Dalton. So I'll take Devontae Parker.
Yeah, and I definitely understand that line of thought, especially Devontae kind of having the up and up quarterback coming with Tua. Tua hasn't really put up gaudy numbers quite yet, and I don't think anybody really expected him to on the Dolphins this early in the process. But CeeDee Lamb, surprisingly, has been probably the more consistent wide receiver since Dak has been out. He's been the one guy who hasn't really seen his production drop either way. So at least for myself this week, I'm definitely going to be starting him. I'm considering starting him over a guy like Tyler Lockett on Thursday night, but that's neither here or there. But just purely speaking on the Lamb versus Parker matchup, I'm not super crazy about Lamb's matchup, and I don't care who's throwing him the ball. It's definitely not Dak Prescott, so you got to take that into effect. But Lamb definitely, in my eyes, is going to have a more productive week than Parker.
Yeah, so Lamb only has 2 games this year where he didn't score at least 10. That came against Washington, where he had one rushing yard on 1 carry, 0 receptions on 5 targets. And then he had 8.6 points against Philly. So, he has provided a pretty solid floor. Even I don't know what he did in relief when Dalton came into that game against the Giants, but in that game he had 20.4 points, which would be his second highest output of the season, just behind the previous week against Cleveland when he had 25. So, I definitely get it. I guess to me, I just think that passing game is kind of smoke and mirrors what we've seen the production. I'm expecting that to not continue. I don't know. I could look like an idiot on this, but I'm kind of happy that we differ because one of us is going to be right.
We'll see. The Cowboys are coming off of bye week. The week before that, CeeDee Lamb had a pretty good performance against, our Steelers. We'll see.
Yeah, we put TJ Watt on him in coverage, so.
Ridiculous.
Okay, so my second wide receiver matchup, a guy that I already mentioned, Jacoby Myers, goes against Houston this week. He's projected 8.63 points. Would you use him? Or would you use Jamison Crowder going against the Chargers, projected at 8.91?
Jacoby Myers. I'm pounding the table for Jacoby Myers. Big respect to Jamison Crowder, for what he's done so far, but not Jacoby Myers.
Literally nothing else.
Absolutely red hot this year. Ever since N'Keal Harry got hurt, he's paced the Patriots and targets interceptions already. Cam Newton has really grown to target Jacoby Myers, early and often. And we saw last night, he scored his first touchdown in the pros by throwing the ball. So I think that kind of speaks volumes to what the Patriots think of him, the different ways they could definitely use him. So, yeah, I'm all over the Jacoby Myers hype train this year.
Yeah, for me, and, nothing against our old boy, not necessarily our old boy, but we saw a lot of him, Joe Flacco. If this were Sam Darnold in this game, a healthy Sam Darnold, I might differ, but I'm with you with Jacoby Myers over Jamison Crowder. What he's been able to do this year, despite such, poor quarterback play and being on that team with nothing else around him, has been nothing short of remarkable. But yeah, I'll take Jacoby Myers here over, Jamison Crowder with Joe Flacco going against the Chargers defense, who I don't think is too bad, at least against the pass. So, I'm on board with you.
So my second one's actually I feel like it shouldn't be an interesting one, but it is. Michael Thomas, that Michael Thomas versus the Atlanta Falcons, or Robert Woods versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Robert Woods projected 14.3 points. The Buccaneers are allowing the 9th least fantasy points to receivers this year, whereas Michael Thomas is facing the 30th ranked pass defense, and Michael Thomas is projected 16.5 points.
I'm going with Michael Thomas, and I'm going to go with him for the same reason that I'm going to bring up the quarterback that I have on the waiver wire. I think that there's a lot of untapped potential there in that New Orleans offense this year that Drew Brees, just being the age he is, hasn't gotten the most out of. And I'm excited to see what this offense does with Jameis Winston under center. So Robert Woods, who I'm mad at, by the way, for his output last week,
same.
The worst defense in football.
Coming off a bye week.
Yeah, coming off a bye week, going against historically bad defense in the Seattle Seahawks, the 2020 version of them. I'll go with Michael Thomas here and hope that he has his first 2019-like Michael Thomas game.
Yeah, we'll see. The output from Thomas last week was not phenomenal by any sorts of means. And I guess we'll talk about it here in a little bit. It's just, what it means with Drew Brees out. But yeah, we'll for all the shit he's talked, he's definitely got a lot of room to make up for shout to the fantasy football season.
He was drafted in the second round.
Oh, I had no idea. No. But okay, yeah, he's got a good matchup this week, so hopefully he can bounce back. But yeah.
MJ is in here. MJ, what is going on, my man? So yeah, my tight end matchup is going to be Dallas Goedert going against Cleveland. He's projected 8.72 points. Still no Zach Ertz there, so he's the guy in that tight end room. Or Jonnu Smith going against Baltimore. He's projected 8.2.
Man, I know we just talked about Carson Wentz and how we don't like the matchup, but I feel like I like Dallas Goedert's matchup just a little bit more than I like Jonnu Smith, especially with Goddard, kind of reestablishing himself as a tight end one without Zach Ertz there for the time being. I feel like I got to go Goddard on this.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm with you. I would think that way as well. And it's funny that you bring up, even though we don't like Carson Wentz's matchup here, but, Dallas Goedert still have a decent game, but Wentz not. And I would look at that almost the same way as like we picked Ben, to have a better day than Lamar Jackson this week, but we picked Justin Jefferson to have a better day than Chase Claypool. So just because the quarterback has numbers going up or down, that doesn't mean one of his weapons is going to be, right there with him in that aspect. So yeah, I'm with you. I'd be using Dallas Goedert over Jonnu Smith as well.
Yeah, the tight end position was very thin, just in terms of finding decent matchups. Yeah, and I guess thin is a synonym for sucks, so I can't disagree there. But my tight end matchup, I have Noah Fant versus the Miami Dolphins, or Austin Hooper versus the Philadelphia Eagles.
It's Fant.
See, I would tend to agree with you right off the bat, but, Drew Lock's a little bit shaken up right now. Noah Fant himself has been dealing with injuries throughout the entire year. He hasn't even been, super productive when he's been on the field. And, yeah, I mean, it's basically a toss-up, whether you believe in, the upside of Fant or the established track record of Austin Hooper.
That's what it is I'll take the upside of Fant just because I don't trust – really any option on a week-to-week basis in that passing game for Cleveland, let alone a guy that's not the top option. Whereas in Denver, it's been up and down, but we've seen, at least it worked to some degree, and Noah Fant be able to put up those numbers, and we know what the potential is there. He's looked like an absolute beast at times. So I'll take the potential of Noah Fant as opposed to whatever the potential might be in Austin Hooper. I think the floor is definitely higher with Fant.
Yeah, it is notable that Hooper is facing the 27th ranked defense just in terms of allowing points per game, whereas Fant is raised.
That just means that Harrison Bryant will probably catch 2 touchdowns.
Oh, yeah. Definitely, yeah. And that Fant's facing a top 10 defense in the Miami Dolphins in terms of allowing points. But, I mean,
I wouldn't feel comfortable using either one of these guys.
Yeah.
Maybe the tight end we're going to talk about on our waiver wire would be a guy that I would use over both of them. But yeah, okay, so let's talk about our waiver wire. So I mentioned that I would use Michael Thomas over a guy like Robert Woods this week, and the reason being is Jameis Winston is going to be my waiver wire quarterback here. Owning just 3% of leagues, obviously, no one's really had him on their roster. Waivers don't go into effect tomorrow. That number is going to skyrocket up. Faces Atlanta this week, one of the worst defenses in football, and I think there's a lot of untapped potential in that passing game. That, not to say Drew Brees is holding them back, like some people might say on Pro Football Focus about certain quarterbacks. However, I do think that there's a lot of untapped potential with Michael Thomas, with Emmanuel Sanders, with guys. I mean, even though, Michael Thomas just runs slants, guys that can stretch the field a little bit. I think that there's a lot more that Jameis Winston, a guy that obviously he's going to turn the ball over a lot more than Drew Brees is, but the risk is much higher. The reward could also be much higher. So I'm interested to see how this goes. I think that for a guy like Jameis Winston, under the tutelage of Sean Payton, there's a reason that he went there as opposed to other places that he could have, and it was this opportunity. He saw what happened with Teddy Bridgewater last year, another backup quarterback in the same position when Drew Brees goes down. I mean, this is a silver platter for him to try to say that he can be the Saints quarterback of the future. I'm interested to see how it goes. I think that just with the weapons that are around him, he could be in for a big day against Atlanta.
Yeah, and I think that's what it comes down to. You have to kind of hope that Jameis not only learned from a guy like Sean Payton, but a guy like Drew Brees as well. From the time he's holding the clipboard on the sideline for basically what's been half of the season already. I completely agree with you. I think there's a ton of untapped potential, in the Saints passing game, and I feel like James is going to try to push the ball, deep and probably often. So we'll see how that pans out. My quarterback, we already kind of alluded to him a little bit earlier. Kirk Cousins owned in about 18% of the ESPN leagues versus the Dallas Cowboys. So he's averaged probably 15 points per game, just under it actually. But he's had performances of 20 points and 17 points in the last 2 weeks. Like I said earlier, he's facing a very weak Dallas secondary. So this is basically just a guy where if you're looking for a 1 week pickup, and I mean, it's hard to find other quarterbacks to have decent matchups like that aren't owned super high. So Kirk Cousins is going to be my waiver wire pickup of the week.
Yeah. So Ricky also said Jameis Winston would be available in that league. Where he's kind of deciding between Tannehill and Wentz. So but also Kirk Cousins is available. So
upside to go Winston. I feel like Winston has the highest upside of anybody in that quarterback group we just talked about.
I was going to say I would take either guys we just talked about over either of those two options for 1 week. Yeah. Now, I mean, I don't think that Tannehill is a bad option going forward, but just you look at these last 2 weeks and now this week against Baltimore, don't love the matchup. I think these two guys have phenomenal matchups. I think for a 1 week, kind of streamer, I'm using Winston or Cousins. And then if it came down to it, I'd be using Tannehill before Wentz, but I would use either of the guys we just talked about before either of those two.
I would agree. Winston and then probably Cousins and then I guess Tannehill over Wentz, but yeah.
Okay, so my running back, kind of making a name for himself all of a sudden in Miami. I don't know if I'm going to say this right. Salvon Ahmed.
Sure.
Owning just 8% of Yahoo leagues. Again, that is going to absolutely jump up when you look at that number tomorrow. Goes against Denver this week, kind of a middle of the pack matchup, but he played over 80% of the snaps for the Dolphins this past week. They got rid of Jordan Howard. They released him. Matt Breida could potentially come back from injury, but I think with the way that Ahmed has played these last 2 weeks, he's kind of solidified himself as the number one guy. Now, we might not see him play 80% of the snaps, but I still think that he would be like the lead guy if there were to be some type of committee formed. And I think if you're looking at the waiver wire for a guy, this could be the type of guy that really helps you in your push to the playoffs. So going against Denver here, I'll take, again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, Salvon Ahmed.
Yeah, I mean, just going from one Dolphins running back to a former Dolphins running back, and the guy we talked about actually, Kalen Ballage is going to be my waiver wire pickup in the week. 48% owned in ESPN leagues. Like you said, it's going to skyrocket. I feel like a lot of these guys are, after the waivers go through, a little bit later tonight. Playing the New York Jets this week. I said it before, I'll say it again. He looks like the guy to own in the Chargers backfield. Josh Kelly, what happened, my dude? I was pulling for you. It looked like the organization was not pulling for you. They went and brought in Kalen Ballage. He's emerged on the scene ever since. 15.2 point performance last week, 16-point performance the week prior. He's hot right now. He's the hot guy in the backfield, and I feel like if you're really searching the waiver wire for a potential starting running back, then you're not going to find a whole lot of production and upside that Ballage brings. So, yeah, definitely him at 48%.
I can get behind that, even though I'm not a fan of Ballage. The usage is there. So, the per touch may not look great, but at the end of the day, he's going to have a pretty solid floor with how many times he's touching the ball. Moving along, my wide receiver is going to be Jacoby Myers. Only just 48% of Yahoo leagues, goes against Houston this week. I think the Patriots have a new number one wide receiver, at least for the time being. Obviously, Julian Edelman on IR. N'Keal Harry's hurt as well, and he hasn't really put up the production we expected him to as a first-round pick. Jacoby Myers looks like he's the guy.
Yeah, Jacoby Myers is going to be my waiver wire pickup as well, under 38% of ESPN leagues. Double-digit performances the last 4 games. 3 of those coming without reaching the end zone. He's faced the Patriots in targets and catches the last 4 weeks ever since N'Keal Harry's kind of hit the hayside. And no, I definitely agree with you. Myers is the wide receiver 1. And I feel like even with the presence of a guy like N'Keal Harry, he's still going to be getting a very, very large percentage of those targets.
So we're on the same page there, and I think based off the conversation earlier, we could potentially be on the same page with our tight ends as well. It's going to be Logan Thomas, owning just 18% of Yahoo leagues, going against Cincinnati this week, who gives up the second most points to the tight end position. You got to love the matchup, and I don't necessarily love the player, but when you're looking for a tight end off the waiver wire, it's kind of at the point where you're just looking for the best matchup and kind of throwing a dart, and that's, Logan Thomas is just in a prime position this week. Hopefully he finds the end zone, because that's really what's going to make or break his day. He's not going to get you the yards or the catches to have a great day. I feel like he has to find the end zone in this game. But, again, going against a team that gives up the second most points to the position, I think it's a dart worth throwing.
Yeah, and he's on about 30% of ESPN leagues, and you kind of took the words right out of my mouth. He's fresh off a 10-point performance, and wow, it is a very slim pickings on the tight end waiver wire. But I feel like this guy offers the most upside, like you already said. Second worst defense at tight ends. You just kind of roll the dice with that and see what lands up.
If Alex Smith is going to creep towards 400 yards passing, I mean, like he did against
you got to
Detroit.
like their chances, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously have Terry McLaurin as the number one in that passing game. J.D. McKissick looks like he's probably the number two option. Yeah. But beyond that, I mean, if Alex Smith is going to throw the balls off the zig against Detroit, and we expect Washington to be trailing in most games and have to play catch up, this is a guy, if he's the third option in that passing game, he's going to have some weeks where he puts up some decent numbers, and going against a team that gives up the second most to the position, I feel like this is a week where that could potentially happen. So, but, real quickly, I guess we kind of touched on it because I brought up Jameis Winston already. We brought up Michael Thomas a little bit earlier. Drew Brees going to miss some time. We don't exactly know how much time. Broken ribs. And what was the other thing?
So he had 5 broken ribs, a couple on both sides of his body, and then collapsed the lung.
Collapsed the lung. Okay. Yeah, I can't remember if it was something with a lung or the kidney. Because I remember, was it Keenan Allen a couple years ago in the end zone? He lacerated his kidney or something like that.
Yeah, it was his kidney or spleen, something like that.
Yeah. But anyway, so this injury to Drew Brees is going to take him off the field for a little bit. I feel like this is deja vu to last year. When we saw Teddy Bridgewater come in when Drew Brees had the thumb issue. So we're going to see what Jameis Winston can do in this offense. I think that the potential is there for this team to start putting up a lot of points. Now, I understand Drew Brees, when he's healthy, he's going to be the guy there. But this is Jameis Winston's showcase to show he can be the number one guy when they move on from Drew Brees, which could be potentially this to be his last year as a Saint. So we'll see if Jameis Winston can make the most of it. With the weapons that he has around him, the potential is definitely there.
Definitely, yeah. And I just got to wonder how it affects, the people around him in the Saints offense. I know a lot of people have stocks and other players on the Saints, besides Drew Brees and, Jameis Winston, who, like we already kind of agreed, his share on, both the Yahoo and ESPN is going to go through the roof this week. But I think whenever you look at a guy like Alvin Kamara, I think he'll probably benefit the most. He did lead the Saints in, receptions and targets during the game last week. And yeah, I just think, with him scoring 3 times, granted, I think all 3 of them were whenever Drew Brees was in the game. But I think they're really going to look to rely on the running backs a little bit more. So I think Latavius Murray would, kind of benefit, a little bit as well. But I think Alvin Kamara is probably the main proponent. My only worry is that Sean Payton doesn't get his head out of his ass, doesn't keep running Taysom Hill 8 to 10 times a game, because Taysom Hill getting as many rushing attempts as Alvin Kamara last week, very worrisome. You kind of worry about that throughout the course of the entire game.
Yeah, I think that the biggest question mark for me on this offense now, other than, can Michael Thomas get back to form? The big X factor for me with this quarterback, I guess you can call it change, but, switch due to injury, it's Emmanuel Sanders. What is his potential now with a guy like Jameis Winston under center as opposed to Drew Brees? Because, we know that, Michael Thomas, not that he's a very good route runner. He's known, for his game, though, in the short to intermediate routes. If Emmanuel Sanders is able to be like a field stretcher and play to Jameis Winston's abilities better, and Drew Brees maybe wasn't getting the most out of him because he doesn't throw the deep ball, I think that Emmanuel Sanders really is like the X factor, maybe a little bit of Traquan Smith as well. Guys that can stretch the field. Those would be the guys that I'm curious as to how their potential is affected now with going from Brees to Winston.
Yeah, I would almost think those guys that are able to stretch the field, like Sanders, like a Traquan Smith, those guys. But I would almost kind of hope that their production jumps up a little bit, just because I know Jameis does indeed like to, look at the deep ball and throw it. But, like we've already kind of touched on, Michael Thomas, 2 receptions on 7 targets last week. It's not going to get it done. And, I'm just not sure the rapport that those two have. And, it's not like Michael Thomas runs a whole lot of deep routes as is. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure he got in a fist fight over it. But no, I mean.
Sources. Yeah,
per sources. But it's almost it's a wait and see with Michael Thomas. But for almost everybody else in that Saints offense, I got to like that they're, on the up and up with Jameis at the helm now.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm right there with you. But we shall see. And that's the great part about this is we can We can watch it play out and then come look at us either be idiots or geniuses.
That's right. Hey, either or, 50-50.
It's 50-50, but with our track record, I mean, what side do you want to be on? Don't be on the wrong side of history.
Looks good, baby.
You got anything else?
No, I don't. Get well, Christian McCaffrey. Please hurry up. Tired of waiting.
Good point. Okay, yeah, I got to tell you guys about Keats Barbershop real quick, which is an old-fashioned barbershop located at 180 Brighton Avenue in Rochester, PA. He's open 11 to 7 Tuesday through Friday. He's open 9 to 4 on Saturday. Every Tuesday, he does $5 off for military personnel, first responders, and nurses. Again, that's Keats Barbershop, 180 Brighton Avenue in Rochester, PA. I bring it up every single episode, but I got to bring it up again. Rocking around the 412, we are in like the last final push. We got about a month left until we start announcing some winners. I will say we completed shopping already for one family as of yesterday. A lot of online shopping this year. That's just the way that it's going to be. It has to be. But hey, I'm excited to do it. When I buy these things, it warms my heart. It makes me appreciate what I've had my entire life so much more. And to be able to do this, thanks to everybody that donates, it's unbelievable what you guys do and help us do. So thank you so much. If you've already donated, if you've helped share anything that you guys have contributed to the cause, if you want to get involved, just search at Around the 412, our Twitter handle, and the word rockin', and it will come up right away. It will be a video of my face, probably similar beard length at the time as well, because I'm growing it out again. Telling you guys about the mission, what we got going on, and then it has a GoFundMe link, which will take you right to where you can donate, and the mission is on there as well. So again, if you want to get involved, you can do that, and we greatly appreciate it. Every single dollar donated goes to these families. The prizes come out of our wallet, and the prizes, which we have 12 of right now, include a James Conner jersey, a signed Minka Fitzpatrick jersey, a signed Juju football, a signed Jack Ham pylon, a signed Brian Rust puck, some Joe Musgrove autographed baseballs, autographed Chase Claypool picture from when he scored his first touchdown against the Broncos. So, there's a ton of stuff. So get involved with it. If you donate at least $20, you're going to be eligible to win any of the stuff that I just stated. So thanks for listening to Around the 412. This has been a presentation of Crowworthy. Winners are serving winners coast to coast with sports, gambling, fantasy, and more. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Around the 412. You can follow them at Crowworthy. Visit the Pittsburgh City page at crowworthy.com for podcasts such as this one, blogs, gambling advice, fantasy advice, of course, and all that good stuff. Until next